Good morning, Highlanders. So last time that we talked about ethical decision making, I introduced you to the ethical principles. And this time we're going to be taking those ethical principles and learning how to make ethical decisions with them and then provide justification for the decisions that we make. So this image here is this is a monkey that's being used in medical research, which certainly brings up some ethical questions as far as what we should or ought to be doing. So what I'd like to do is come back to this example. We have this lady who clearly is smoking, and this brings us to the question we were looking at before: should we allow U.S. citizens to smoke tobacco? Should we do that? And so when we need to make a decision regarding that question, we can use the ethical principles to kind of like help our thinking about what decision we should make. And then once we make the decision, then we have these ethical principles to explain why we made the decision that we did. And so our government has made basically the decision that we should allow U.S. adult citizens to decide if they smoke or not. So we have four ethical principles that we sort of look at in making a decision like this, and then to talk about that. Now, when we're talking about ethical principles, there's some language I want to introduce you to as we apply these ethical principles. So when we make the ethical decision, we think about each of those ethical principles. First of all, we cannot follow all four ethical principles. You can't do all of them. If you could give people a choice on what they did and protect them all from the hazards of smoking, it wouldn't be an ethical decision. It's tough because you can't do both those things. So we need some language to help us express which of those principles are kind of like driving the decision. So when you're making an ethical decision and you're looking at each principle, a principle might be given priority. So this means that this is the most important principle in the decision that you're making. Other principles, you might be completely violating them. Like you know that you ought to do this, but you just can't in the decision. So if you're violating a principle, it means you don't follow this principle so that you can give priority to another principle. And then the other kind of main thing that we might do is just that a principle doesn't really apply. So there are some principles that in a particular decision is not important in making the decision. So let's look at the smoking rules decision here. Autonomy. So the decision is we let people make a choice whether they use tobacco or not. So we're clearly giving priority to autonomy. We're letting people make decisions and about views they hold and actions that they take. We're giving people priority. Autonomy is given priority in this case. Justice, distributing benefits and burdens fairly. I would say that for the most part, the principle of justice isn't really applying that much here. You might make a case that since we let adults make the choice and children not, you might say that you're distributing benefits unequally there, but it's not really the main driver in this decision. So I would call justice and do not apply in this case. Beneficence, do good. Anytime you are doing something that is protective of someone, we would categorize that as doing good. So if we're letting people choose to take something in their body that we know is harmful, that is a failure to do good. So we are clearly violating the principle of beneficence in this case. We're not doing good, and so that we can let people have the choice. And the last one, non-maleficence. So a lot of people would be tempted to say that we're violating non-maleficence, that the principle is do no harm, and that we're doing harm in this case. However, I would say that failing to do good is not the same as doing harm. If I made everyone smoke, then we could say that I'm doing harm. But in this case, I'm just giving you the choice to smoke. And so for the do no harm one, I would categorize this in that it doesn't apply all that much. And that is counterintuitive for some people, but this just the nuance here that failing to do good is not quite the same. So again, autonomy given priority. Beneficence, we're totally violating that. Justice, non-maleficence, I'd say those two we are don't apply very strongly